Why is she just straight out the womb? Well, out the egg. Why is she straight out the egg bullying, bro? Chill out. If you're in your 20s or 30s, chances are growing up you watched a movie called The Land Before Time. And even if you haven't watched it, you've at least heard of it. You know that it was a big movie that a lot of kids saw back in the day. Well, I apparently had never seen this movie. I watched it last night just because I didn't think I had seen all of it. I thought I had seen maybe a piece or two here and there, but I think what happened was I saw one or two episodes of the TV show from 2007, maybe, because I watched the movie last night for the first time, apparently, and it was a new experience to me. This has been a movie for me that I know that everyone has seen, and it's come up in conversation amongst my friends when we're talking about movies that were big childhood movies or nostalgic movies. And every time this movie comes up, I kind of just get quiet, and I don't know if anyone's noticed in conversation, but I've never seen it, so I can't really comment on it. But now I can, because I have. Now, this isn't a very long movie, and I don't have the same nostalgia factor to go along with it that other people might have, but I did want to hop on here and give some quick thoughts that I had while watching it. One of the things that stood out to me while watching The Land Before Time is that it feels like a classic. I know that it is a classic, but it's got that classic animated feel. And maybe there's a psychological aspect there where knowing it's a classic makes it feel that way in my head a little bit more. But I don't know, something about just the music and the animated look, it just feels like childhood. And I think that good feeling that the movie gives off is part of the reason why it gets remembered so much by people who watched it as a kid. And that on top of the fact that people probably watched it a lot during their formative years of childhood, but that's just one of the things that goes into it. And I'm glad that it gets remembered by so many people, because for me, having watched it for the first time, I think it deserves to be. There are some things that I think older animated movies did really well, and newer animated movies don't really do it as well, if they even do it at all. And one of those things that they don't really do very much at all anymore is introduce kids to death. And I know that sounds like a terrible thing that I just said, but what I mean is this movie, The Land Before Time, does it in a way that isn't morbid. It's able to introduce the bad aspects of life to kids in a way that teaches mourning and acceptance and moving on and moving forward and working through things. And that's something I used to really appreciate about older animated movies, is that there were these themes and these topics that kids need to know. But now I feel like studios have kind of shied away from doing that, both because there are parents who want to keep their kids sheltered and studios are just afraid of backlash. But that's something I think we're sorely missing in today's animated movies. There are still definitely some that do a good job of teaching kids things and helping them grow and learn, but it's just something that I appreciate that this movie was able to do because it was older and, you know, there's less scrutiny back then. And speaking of the topic of death, this movie was surprisingly kind of depressing. It was pretty sad. You know, we started out the first act of the movie. I say the first act like this movie isn't less than an hour and 20 minutes, but you know, we start out the first part of the movie with the death of Littlefoot's mom, and it's kind of doesn't get any happier until the very end of the movie. And you know, there's some good things that happen in the movie. You know, Littlefoot makes friends and things like that, but there's always this underlying tone of sadness behind everything. Typically when I watch something for the first time, or even upon rewatch, I'll Google whatever it is and look at the cast list and a couple other things. Well, during my little research session, I didn't really get any happier. While I was looking at the cast list, I realized that the voice of Ducky was Judith Barcy. And if you don't know her story, it's a tragic one. I have never seen The Land Before Time, but I know her as the voice actress of, I forget the character's name. She's the little girl in All Dogs Go to Heaven. Well, she was only 10 years old when her father murdered both her and her mother and then commit suicide. And I had kind of forgotten about that because I had only seen her in All Dogs Go to Heaven. And just to be reminded of that is just terrible. That is one of the worst things I've ever heard, to be honest. Although her life was cut short at only 10 years old, which is crazy to think about, it doesn't even make sense. But at the very least, her legacy will live on through people who watched what she was in then and now. People will remember her and remember her story. Now, other than Judith, I only recognize one other name from the cast list. The cast list wasn't full of people that I know. And that's kind of to be expected because this movie came out in '88, I think. It's been a hot minute since it released. It's 36, 37 years old. But the only other name I recognized was Frank Welker, who's known for Transformers and things like that. He's a pretty popular voice actor. He's been in a lot of stuff. But he played Spike and the Sharptooth. And I thought that was pretty cool because this is an older movie and it's kind of difficult to find people you know in some of these older movies, but I thought that was neat. Well, I'm glad that I got to go back and watch this movie for the first time after so many people that I know had seen it as kids and I was just missing out. I'm glad that I got to finally experience it and understand it. But I think that's all I've really got for this video. Like I said, the movie wasn't very long, but I just wanted to hop on here and give some quick thoughts, even if the review also isn't very long. I'm sorry if this review was kind of depressing, but until next time, bye.